What would you do if you woke up living someone else's most vulnerable moment? Share your thoughts. The room was a suffocating box of beige walls and fluorescent light, the dull hum vibrating in Claire's ears like a relentless pulse. Her fingers clenched and unclenched beneath the polished mahogany conference table, knuckles whitening beneath the carefully manicured nails. Around her, suits whispered and shifted, eyes flickering past her to the glowing projections that demanded attention as if she were an invisible flicker in a storm of faces. Her voice was cut off mid-sentence, drowned beneath a sharper, more assertive tone that seemed to embody the room's collective impatience. Claire, if you can't grasp the core strategy by now, maybe you're not the right fit for this project. The words landed like cold rain, sinking deep beneath the skin. A cruel smile spread across her team lead's mouth, confirming the verdict that was invisible yet undeniable. Claire was not just dismissed, she was obliterated from view. For a heartbeat, the world tilted. The steady click of keyboards and distant murmurs turned rancid, a cacophony of exclusion that pressed relentlessly against her chest. Her emerald eyes, bright and sharp, flickered windows of distress masked beneath composure. A stifled cough betrayed her mounting humiliation as she twisted in her chair, compelled to reclaim dignity amid the unraveling confidence. The oppressive glare of the room's harsh lighting cast long, unyielding shadows across her face, accentuating the sharp angles and the faint quiver at the corners of her lips. The distant sound of a clock's ticking seemed to accelerate, marking time that sped away from her. She glanced briefly at the mirrored surface embedded in the glass of the conference room's partition, a cold reflection of the woman forced to wear invisibility like a cloak. Her thoughts spiraled, tethered by the fear choking her. Was this professional rejection a mirror of her own disintegrating identity? The letter she kept folded in her bag felt heavier at that moment, the shifting handwriting on its fragile surface hinting at unstable realities beyond walls and titles. The meeting adjourned abruptly. As colleagues filed past, their faces blurred into a sea of indifference and defeat. Claire sat motionless for a moment longer, the echo of her leader's dismissive tone pulsating in her ears. She rose with deliberate slow grace, shoulders heavy yet resisting collapse. The corridor stretched before her, a tunnel painted in dull neutrals and flickering lights. Her heels clicked softly against the linoleum, each step a complex blend of defiance and despair. Outside the glass doors, the suburban streets were dipped in the cool grays of twilight, the soft hum of distant traffic mingling with the rustle of autumn leaves stirred by the fickle breeze. The air tasted faintly of rain and lost chances. Claire paused beneath a flickering street lamp, its hesitant glow painting her features in chiaroscuro shadow and light interwoven like the conflicting truths within. Her gaze lifted toward the night sky where muted stars struggled to pierce the encroaching clouds. In that suspended moment, her reflection flickered faintly on the darkened window of a closed storefront, a ghostly echo of herself, seen and unseen, known and unknown. A trembling breath escaped as the weight of the unseen reverberated within her, a silent, profound yearning for recognition and the elusive contours of self. The camera lingered on her face, the quiet storm of resilience brewing behind her calm exterior before the scene faded into the muted pulse of the city night, suspended between despair and the fragile promise of transformation. The car's engine thrummed quietly beneath Claire as she sat parked on the edge of the suburban street, the creeping dusk filtering through the windshield in muted blues and bruised purples. The echo of the day's humiliation sat heavy on her chest, each breath shallow and uneven, as if the stale air trapped inside the vehicle tightened around her ribs. Outside, the neighborhood's quaint houses lay bathed in the soft, indifferent glow of street lamps, their windows casting accusatory darkness into the night. Her fingers absently traced the worn edge of the leather-bound journal resting on the passenger seat, a silent witness to her internal turmoil. The shifting handwriting on the fragile letter inside fluttered in the slight breeze from a cracked window, the ink's undulating form a stark reminder of the instability lurking beneath her carefully constructed facade. Claire's emerald eyes, usually so striking, now shimmered with a hidden storm, reflections of a mind wrestling with rejection and loss. Her gaze flicked to a passing neighbor walking their dog, laughter spilling unintentionally into the encroaching solitude, the normalcy of their existence a jarring contrast to the fracturing confidence within her. The humid air pressed insidiously against the glass, condensation blurring the view like tears she was too proud to shed. She swallowed hard, biting down on the sharp taste of suppressed anger, a growing ember smoldering beneath the ash of resignation. In the reflection off the rearview mirror, she caught a glimpse of herself, fragments of vulnerability flickering alongside the professional mask she wore daily. The tension coiled tighter, constricting yet strangely galvanizing. Her breath hitched as a faint, unused key dangling from the ignition caught the dim streetlight, its metallic gleam a beacon of possibility or perhaps a reminder of the doors yet unopened. She pressed it between her fingers, the cold hard edge grounding her as a subtle ember of resolve nudged against the tide of despair. Behind the veil of rejection, a fragile resistance took shape. She recalled the tender words penned on the shifting letter, a promise, a hint of something beyond the monotony and the invisible ache. The quiet corners of her mind began to stir far beyond the narrow walls of her daily routine. Slowly, she exhaled a breath both weary and resolute. The car's dashboard began to fade from view as her thoughts sharpened, moving like shadows between doubt and defiance. The faintest swell of determination seeped into her posture, animated by an inner question that hung in the air with unspoken urgency. Outside, the street lamp's halo flickered uncertainly, casting elongated shadows across the pavement, as if reflecting the tenuous boundary between past complacency and the beckoning unknown. As night deepened, the city's distant hum faded into a pregnant silence, leaving Claire poised on the cusp between surrender and awakening, a fragile moment suspended in time, crackling with the electric possibility of change. Her fingers finally unclenched the letter, letting it rest softly in the journal. A lingering glance toward the car's locked doors, a breath drawn slow and measured, signaled the quiet inception of a journey not yet understood but irrevocably begun. The scene dissolved in the dim glow of the dashboard light, settling on the faint, flickering image of a key, and emblem of unlocking futures and identities yet to be revealed. The dim glow of the streetlights outside her apartment window spilled feebly into the cluttered living room, casting long, fractured shadows across the worn carpet. Claire sat slumped on the edge of her couch, the day's crushing weight settling into the hollow spaces within her chest. Her emerald eyes, sharp yet tired, flickered toward the old wooden desk nestled in the corner, a relic from a past life, now layered with dust and forgotten hopes. Her fingers grazed the surface of her leather journal, the worn edges a silent companion through years of quiet yearning and unheard words. Tonight, a restless energy stirred beneath the exhaustion, pulling her gaze downward to the small stack of unopened envelopes resting beside the journal. Among them, one letter lay apart, a delicate sheet of paper creased and folded with an elusive mystery. The faint hum of the city beyond mingled with the distant wail of sirens, an eerie symphony underscoring the isolation that wrapped itself willingly around her. She hesitated only for a moment before unfolding the letter, her breath catching as she traced the fluid, shifting script that seemed almost alive beneath her fingertips, words that swirled and changed, ink flowing like liquid memory resisting confinement. The letter bore no signature, only an enigmatic invitation hinting at a door concealed within the monotony of her existence and opening into lives she had never imagined, paths unknown and untaken. Claire's heart quickened, an ember awakening in the depth of winter. The unstable handwriting mirrored the fragile threads of her fractured self, weaving a subtle promise of escape and transformation. In the faint mirror hanging above the mantel, her reflection wavered, fragmented and elusive, echoing the turmoil within. The glass trapped both the visible woman and the shifting shadows of the truths she had yet to confront. Her green eyes met her own gaze, shadows deepening in their depths, a silent dialogue beginning between who she was and who she sought to become. A soft creak from the narrow hallway stirred her awareness. She rose slowly, taking the letter with her as she moved toward the window. The night air was cool and bracing, carrying whispers of distant lives, the secrets of other rooms and other stories, each a prism refracting the possibilities she ached for. With the trembling dawn of resolve brushing against her skin, Claire's fingers closed over a small, ornate key resting on the windowsill, a symbol of lock and release. Her breath mingled with the night air as she turned away from the fractured reflection and toward a silent, shimmering horizon. The camera lingered on Claire's silhouette framed against the cold glow of the cityscape, the letter held close in her grasp, layered with the promise of worlds borrowed and selves unknown. The scene faded into the muted whisper of the shifting letters, ink on unstable script setting into form as the subtle spark of transformation caught flame, leading Claire into the fathomless depths of Act Two. The late evening rain painted the windows of Claire's modest apartment in shimmering streaks that blurred the suburban streetlights into long bands of orange and gray. The room was dimly lit, shadows pooling in the corners as if to swallow the small space whole. Claire sat at her kitchen table, the leather-bound journal and mysterious letter lying open in front of her like a clandestine invitation. Outside, the world was a muted symphony of dripping eaves and distant thunder. Her fingers hovered uncertainly over the fragile parchment, the shifting handwriting a living thing, its ink warping and twisting, revealing phrases she hadn't read before, phrases that hinted at secrets unlocked by unseen keys. A sudden pulse of fear surged beneath her skin, mixed curiously with a spark of strange, burgeoning hope. Then, without warning, a sharp jolt rippled through her consciousness. The room swirled and warbled. Shadows deepened and expanded as if reaching out to engulf her. In a blink, the walls dissolved, being replaced by the sharp, brilliant contours of someone else's reality. Claire gasped, her breath catching in a throat unfamiliar and achingly young. She blinked against the hard fluorescent light overhead and felt the crush of childish bones beneath her, the flutter of adolescent terror stirring deep within. She was no longer herself. Around her, a teenage girl stood trembling by the threshold of a life dripping with conflict, the echo of raised voices, slammed doors, and raw, unfiltered emotions. The air was thick with the metallic tang of anger and tears, palpable and suffocating. "Why can't you understand?" A voice cracked in anguish. Claire felt the sting of those words like a whip lashing across her new skin. The girl's heart pounded wildly as she faced her parents' storm of disappointment and frustration. The conflict, raw and immediate, wrapped around Claire as if binding her into the tangled thread of this borrowed existence. Yet within this chaos, a curious calm took root, a fragile bloom in the fertile soil of fear and pain. Claire blinked, feeling the nuanced pulse of life coursing through another's veins. She was not merely a passive observer but an unwilling participant, wrestling for control, yearning for meaning. Her green eyes, so familiar in her own reflection, now looked out from this unfamiliar face, wide with vulnerability and a searing insight. This isn't just their fight, she realized in a breathless moment, it's mine. The girl's tear-streaked face mirrored the turmoil inside Claire, fractured, conflicted, but undeniably alive. The room spun again, the voices rising in crescendo, words that could break or bind, wounds that could fester or heal. Suddenly, the world shifted again, faster, more disorienting. The journal and letter were no longer on the table, replaced by a trembling hand clutching a rusted key, its surface cold and heavy with unspoken promise. Claire's heart hammered wildly, not just in fear but with a raw, tremulous hope. The battle lines within her were drawn anew, not for control, but for understanding. Her journey had begun not in solitude but through the lives intertwined with her own. The scene closed with Claire's eyes locking in the mirror of a dusty hallway, an unsettling reflection that blurred between two lives, two identities locked in an uneasy dance. The flickering light overhead hummed softly, holding the tension of possibilities unborn, questions unresolved. The silent question lingered. Who was she truly meant to be? And with it, the story plunged deeper into shadows, toward the uncertain dawn. The borrowed life clung to Claire with an unnerving intimacy. Each breath drawn by the teenage girl she now inhabited carried echoes, not her own tensions, palpable in every word exchanged, the crack in the family's fragile facade widening with every silence. Claire's green eyes, so familiar in her own reflection, now searched for footing in the churning sea of youthful angst and stifled rage. The room blurred around her, the heavy scent of sweat and stale perfume mingling with shingles of unsaid regrets. The girl's mother stood rigid by the door, her voice brittle and sharp as shattered glass. "You'll never be enough. You don't fit here." Pain lanced through Claire's chest, unfamiliar and yet achingly vital. The message was both a dagger and a mirror, reflecting her own buried fears of inadequacy and invisibility back upon her. Yet within that reflection flickered a sliver of something forbidden power. With cautious determination, Claire navigated the turbulent household, piecing together fractured relationships and hidden desires. Each gesture softening a harsh word, altering a charged glance, was a tentative brushstroke on a canvas of fragile hope. She grasped briefly at control, savoring the novelty, the startling rush of shaping a life not her own. But the burgeoning courage was met with resistance. Each choice rippled outward, unsettling delicate balances. A whispered accusation here, a cold shoulder, the relationship strained beneath the weight of unseen influence. Doubt gnawed at Claire's resolve, slicing through the exhilaration like quicksilver. In moments stolen from the storm, she retreated into quiet reflection, the shifting letter from her bag a constant reminder of unstable identity. Its ink often blurred or twisted, a visual metaphor for her disintegrating self amid borrowed lives. One evening, seated before a mirror in the borrowed girl's room, Claire confronted the reflection. The face that stared back at her was both stranger and intimate, a kaleidoscope of youth and pain. "Who am I?" she whispered, "when I'm not myself?" Her words hung heavy, an echo of the existential chasm opening within. The mirror's surface, fractured by the play of shadows and light, seemed to answer with fragile ambiguity, leaving her suspended between loss and discovery. The tension mounted as a sudden call pulled her into a confrontation, an emergency within the borrowed life's fractured family, a crisis that demanded action, choices that held consequences she could neither predict nor evade. Claire's heart thundered as she stepped into the swirling chaos, the fragile threads of autonomy and empathy intertwining dangerously. Her resolve stiffened, but the stakes revealed themselves in ragged breaths and faltering steps. In a moment of desperate clarity, she grasped the rusted key hidden in the borrowed girl's hand, a symbol not just of unlocking doors, but of unlocking deeper truths within herself. The attic window, glimpsed through the borrowed life's memories, flickered with uncertain light, shadows dancing on the precipice of revelation. As the scene pulses with breathless intensity, the question lingers: how far will Claire risk the fragile bonds she's weaving? The letter's shifting ink twists once more its message, unreadable yet beckoning, ushering the narrative inexorably toward the next unknown chapter. The borrowed world around Claire pulsed with a harsh brightness, the sterile kitchen bathed in an unforgiving slant of sunlight that seemed to spotlight the shattering moment. She stood rigid, the teenage girl's heart pounding in her borrowed chest, trembling under the weight of a secret finally unveiled. The room smelled faintly of burnt toast and stale coffee, a homely scent now tainted by revelation. A letter lay on the scratched tabletop, its edges crumpled as if cried over countless times before, the ink smeared but still legible. Claire's apprehensive fingers reached out to touch it, bridging two fragmented histories, the girl's and her own. This letter was a confession, a raw and unsettling truth that clawed its way out from beneath years of silence. It spoke of a betrayal so deep it wasn't just the family's fabric torn, but Claire's entire understanding of her identity unmade. The brother she never knew, the shadow at the heart of the family's secret, was bound to a dark incident, one that echoed with guilt and denial. Her green eyes shimmered with the heaviness of disbelief and dawning horror. The shifting ink on the letter, once a curiosity, now felt like a grim prophecy fulfilled, the fluid words concretizing her fractured past and uncertain future. Outside, the mundane suburban street remained oblivious, the late morning sun glossing over cracked pavements and neatly trimmed hedges. Yet within this borrowed life, time had fractured moments hung suspended in stark contrast, reality splitting at the seams. Claire's breathing staggered, the weight of knowing cascading through her. The mirror in the cramped hallway reflected back a face both foreign and intimate, the flickering light distorting and clarifying in cycles, her own reflection intertwined with the shadows of lives she was not meant to live. Whispers of regret and unspoken apologies hovered in the air, and a soft, urgent voice echoed the girl's voice, but with Claire's understanding. I never wanted to be the secret. Pain and empathy collided, ripping open old wounds as Claire grasped the true cost of her intrusion, not just the risk of losing herself but the unintended consequence of resurrecting buried sorrows. The letter trembled in her grasp as the borrowed heart beat faster. The key, once a symbol of curious discovery, now hung heavy, a lock undone revealing chambers of memory once sealed. The attic window light from before seemed to flicker in her mind's eye, a beacon amidst encroaching darkness. A sudden sharp knock at the door jarred the fragile stillness, the intrusion a stark reminder that the truths unearthed could no longer be contained. Claire's sharp intake of breath was a shadow of the choice looming, whether to confront or to flee, to harm or to heal. The camera pulled tight on her face, a tempest of fear, resolve, and silent anguish before cutting to the letter's cryptic final line, blurred but potent. Some truths ask for sacrifice. Silence wrapped the scene as the screen faded to black, leaving the audience suspended at the precipice of revelation and consequence, the turning point where Claire's journey would shift irrevocably, hurtling toward confrontation and self-discovery. The oppressive gray morning seeped through the cracked blinds, turning Claire's apartment into a prison of muted light and shadows. The air hung heavy with the scent of cold rain that had yet to break, and the distant rumble of thunder whispered a warning she felt deep in her bones. She sat on the edge of her bed, hands trembling, clutching the shifting letter whose ink seemed to ripple and fade beneath her gaze, echoing the disintegrating fabric of her identity. Her reflection caught in the cracked mirror across the room, a fractured image of herself distorted by time and turmoil. Her green eyes, once vibrant and sharp, now mirrored a desolate void, shimmering with unshed tears. The room breathed around her, silent but suffocating, suffused with the weight of loneliness that pressed in like the closing walls of a cage. Memories of the lives she had inhabited, briefly but intensely, flickered like haunted ghosts. Faces desperate for salvation, moments where her hands had trembled between choice and consequence. Each borrowed breath came at a cost, fracturing the fragile severance she once held between herself and the chaos of others' realities. Her chest heaved as she struggled against the tidal pull of despair, the fragile hope unraveling thread by thread. The shifting letter trembled in her grasp, its ink swirling into illegibility, as if mocking her faltering grasp on truth and self. Outside, the storm finally broke in, pelting the window in relentless sheets. Its rhythmic drumming echoed the chaos within, a relentless percussion underscoring her spiraling thoughts. Claire's voice emerged as a bare whisper, fragile and tentative. "What am I losing?" No answer came but the indifferent thunder and the somber dance of shadows across the room. The wooden floorboards creaked beneath her, each groan resonant with the quiet collapse of her defenses. Desperation clawed at her throat as scenes from the borrowed lives twisted in her mind, choices undone, connections shattered, a trail of unintended pain. The faces of those she had touched flickered and blurred, slipping beyond reach like smoke in the wind. A solitary key lay on the bedside tablet, the cold metal, a cruel reminder of promises unfulfilled, doors unopened, and identities slipping through her fingers like grains of sand. The mirror's fractured surface caught a final glimpse of her quivering lips, parted in silent plea, before the scene dissolved into a shroud of darkness and rained a profound descent into the abyss where self and shadow collided. The frame lingered on the rain's streaked window, the liquid trails tracing the contours of a world fractured and lonely, in elegy to the shattering of hope and the raw wound of a soul unmoored. The night pressed heavily against the thin panes of Claire's apartment window, a wet cold seeping silently through the cracks. The city beyond was muffled under the dense cloak of fog. The familiar streets faded into an indistinct blur of shadows and echoes. Inside, the air was thick with a suffocating stillness, a silence so deep it seemed to swallow sound itself. Claire sat curled on the floor in a tight ball, her back against the cold wall. The worn leather journal lay open beside her, pages fluttering weakly with a breath of stale air. Her fingers traced the shifting ink of the letter she had discovered, the words trembling and dissolving like memories slipping through her grasp. Her emerald eyes were hollow pools, reflecting nothing but the dim flicker of a dying lamp. The room whispered with the ghosts of fractured lives she had slipped inside like a ghost, only to find herself fragmented and lost within them. The faces, the voices, the painting all blurred together now in a haunting tapestry that wrung her spirit dry. She shivered, the cold seeping deep beneath her skin despite the thin shawl wrapped loosely around her shoulders. Each heartbeat echoed in the hollow space of her chest, a relentless reminder of the growing void where her sense of self once resided. Her breath caught in the silence, a fragile sound nearly swallowed by the oppressive stillness. The letter's shifting handwriting seemed to mock her, its indecipherable words a mirror to her unraveling reality. Outside the window, the street lamps flickered uncertainly, casting trembling shadows that danced like specters upon the cracked walls, phantoms of hope long extinguished. The ticking of a distant clock punctuated the darkness, its uneven rhythm marking time that felt both suspended and accelerating toward her unraveling. Claire's gaze drifted to the small, cracked mirror hanging crookedly on the wall. The reflection it offered was fragmented, herself splintered into shards by the fractured glass. She reached a trembling hand toward it, fingertips brushing the cold surface as if to touch the remnants of a self slipping away. A whisper escaped her lips, scarcely audible even to her, "Who am I?" It was less a question than a despairing surrender. The room seemed to inhale, the shadows drawing closer, folding around her like a shroud woven from her own doubts and fears. The light from the flickering lamp wavered, casting long, dark fingers that reached out to consume the fragile spark of life within her. Suddenly, the journal slid from her grasp, falling open to the floor with a soft thuda sound that resonated like a final defeat in the cavernous silence. She watched it lie there, pages rustling faintly, as if breathing its own mournful breath. Her body sagged, knees drawn up to her chest, chin resting on trembling fists. The world shrank to the cold room, the flickering shadows, and the relentless ticking of time slipping through her fingers. In that profound stillness, hope seemed to wither, leaving only the raw, naked ache of loss and the suffocating grasp of despair. As the screen slowly faded to black, the last image lingered, a solitary, flickering candle on the windowsill, its flame wavering uncertainly before surrendering to the darkness. Silence reigned, vast and complete, a solemn testament to a soul at its breaking point. The room lay in twilight, shadows pooling thick around Claire as she sat motionless on the cold, hardwood floor. Her fingers fumbled with the old letter once more, the ink-shifting serpentine in the dim light fluid, elusive, like the fragmented parts of her own soul she'd been chasing through borrowed bodies and borrowed lives. Around her, the silence was a living thing, heavy with the weight of truths untold and memories not quite hers. The muted hum of the city beyond her window felt distant, like a ghostly pulse against the stillness. Claire's eyes, haunted and hollow, reflected the cracked mirror across the room, an image fractured, just like the letter she cradled. The mirror didn't offer consolation, but for the first time, she didn't look away. Instead, she met her own gaze unflinchingly, acknowledging the depths of loss and fear etched in the contours of her face. A faint creak of the floorboard pulled her attention, subtle yet profound, and her heart fluttered, a small ripple in the ocean of despair. Beneath the loose plank, she found another letter, worn yet unopened, tucked away like a buried secret waiting for reconnection. Her hand hesitated, trembling, before slowly unfolding the fragile envelope. The letter was a whisper from the past, a fragment of promise, a silent thread weaving through the narrative of pain and confusion, hinting at a purpose greater than herself. As she read, a flicker of clarity kindled amidst the wreckage. Her breath caught, and the shifting ink seemed to settle, the words solidifying into a message of endurance and unseen guidance, a hand reaching through time, urging her onward. The letter's closing line lingered, soft and resolute, "You are not alone. The key lies within." Claire's fingers closed gently over the letter, the warmth of connection blossoming faintly in the cold enveloping room. The flickering light from the desk lamp cast long shadows, but a new glow began to suffuse the spacey, fragile dawn settling in the hollow corners. A soft murmur escaped her lips, the first sound in a long silence, "Not alone." Her eyes sought the mirror once more, and there, for a fleeting moment, her reflection held not just despair but a sliver of hope, a hint of self ready to emerge from the ashes. The faint outline of a key etched in the glass seemed to shimmer, an emblem merging past and present, pain and possibility. With slow, deliberate movement, Claire rose, folding the letter carefully and placing it within her journal, a sacred repository of truths and transformations. The room breathed with her, shadows retreating slightly, space expanding, a silent promise that the unraveling was not the end. The camera pulled back, framing her silhouette illuminated by the soft glow of the dim lamp and the trembling light of the approaching dawn beyond the window. The city's first murmurs softened, a backdrop to the fragile heartbeat of renewal within her. The scene held poised at the precipice before fading gently into the quiet hum of night transitioning to day, a metaphor for the journey from despair toward the promise of self-discovery yet to unfold. The first rays of dawn seeped through the worn curtains, casting a warm, diffused glow across the modest room that had become her sanctuary. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and a faint trace of rain still lingering outside. Claire sat upright on her bed, her skin tingling from the remnants of a restless night, eyes heavy but burning with a new sense of resolve. In her trembling hand, she held the small, chipped key that had long been an emblem of her tangled existence. Clutched tightly, it felt both cold and alive, as if vibrating with the cautious promise of unlocking what had remained sealed for too long. Her gaze lingered on the mirror across the room, its surface shallow, yet reflecting the fissures she now recognized within herself. The mirror's fractured reflection flickered weakly as her eyes traced the lines of her face, the subtle signs of exhaustion, the hint of something more, something waiting to emerge. Her breath was slow, deliberate, like a tentative step toward the light after years of darkness. There was no denying the depth of her scars, but beneath them, a fragile seed of hope pressed upwards. A quiet moment passed still, sacred. She set the key down on the bedside table and reached for her leather journal, the worn canvas a vessel filled with fragmented thoughts and quiet revelations. Opening it, she paused over the open page, hesitating only briefly before writing, "The past is a puzzle. Today, I begin to piece it together." The soft scratching of her pen was the only sound, a gentle contrast to the tempest of chaos that had dominated her life. Outside, the first birdsong tenderly broke the dawn silence, an unspoken lullaby of renewal. The colors of the room subtly shifted, shadows receding as the morning grew brighter, an internal shift from despair to cautious awakening. Her fingers brushed the edge of the mirror's crack, feeling the jagged scar of her fractured self. An inward smile flickered small but resolute as she realized that even in the midst of darkness, the faintest glow of change was beginning to bloom. She closed her journal softly, the worn pages now carrying the weight of a fragile hope. Slowly, she swung her legs over the side of the bed, her feet planting firmly on the wooden floor, standing at the threshold of possibility. Her posture was tentative yet steady, as if sensing that the journey ahead was still shrouded in uncertainty but no longer shrouded in despair. Her gaze drifted to the window, where the awakening world bathed softly in golden hues. The storm of the night had passed, and though the path was uncharted, she felt the stirrings of something essential, an ember of strength flickering within. The scene lingered on her silhouette against the dawn, an image of quiet resilience before gently fading into a peaceful silence, a visual promise that even the smallest dawn could herald profound change. The attic was no longer shadowed by despair but illuminated by a faint, growing glow that seemed to seep from the very walls. Claire stood amidst the relics of her past frayed photographs, trembling letters, and the small, rusted key that she now held firmly in her hand. The air around her shimmered with a fragile light, as if the space itself had begun to breathe anew. She inhaled deeply, feeling the cool air fill her lungs, a stark contrast to the choking weight of hopelessness that had shrouded her before. Her eyes traced the contours of the attic, noting how the darkness receded in the presence of her newfound resolve. The shifting handwriting on the letter before her softened, the ink steadying as if affirming her awakening. "This," she whispered, voice strong and unwavering, "this is the truth I must unlock." The words were a declaration, a deliberate step toward the purpose she'd denied herself for so long. Her fingers moved to the small, ornate key, grasping it with intent. It felt heavier than before, a vessel of possibility, a symbol of the hidden door she was now ready to open. The glow around her intensified, casting a golden hue across the cluttered attic, a visual metaphor for hope piercing through the shadows. She approached the dusty wooden chest, the rusted lock and key a perfect match, waiting patiently for the moment of release. With a steady hand, Claire unlocked the chest, the hinges creaking softly as the door swung open. Inside, layers of old photographs and scattered documents revealed truths long suppressed. Among them, she saw a worn, faded photograph, a portrait she hadn't previously dared to confront, yet its presence now felt purposeful, a catalyst for her transformation. Her gaze was drawn to a small, forgotten box tucked beneath the photographs. Reaching in, she uncovered a bundle of letters, their ink bold and unwavering. She hesitated, then chose one at random, unfolding it carefully. The penmanship was her scion, different, more certain now. As she read, a shiver of clarity ran through her veins, the words echoing her own silent yearning for authenticity. "No more hiding," she murmured, a single tear tracing the line of her jaw. Her reflection in the attic window caught her eye, a distorted yet resolute face bathed in shifting light. Her eyes, once clouded by doubt and fear, now shone with purpose. A sudden gust of wind surged through the attic, rattling the loose shutters and carrying the scent of awakening that had long been dormant, earth, hope, and the promise of rebirth. Claire's hand reached towards the mirror, fingertips brushing the glass as if drawing strength from her own reflection. In that luminous moment, she realized her journey was just beginning and that inside her, a quiet, unyielding fire had been reignited. The attic's glow persisted, casting long, aspirational shadows as Claire stood tall, ready to step beyond her self-imposed shadows, toward a future rooted in truth and acceptance. The scene held a tableau of silent determination before slowly fading into the soft glow of dawn streaming through the attic window, symbolizing the blossoming of inner light amid the darkness. The attic was ablaze with a luminous, almost sacred light, pouring through a small, shattered window and illuminating the dust particles that swirled like tiny stars, each one a fragment of her past, her pain, and her awakening. Claire stood at the center, chest rising and falling steadily, clutching the final, unsealed key that had been the symbol of her captivity and her salvation. The shadows that once loomed in darkness now danced away, retreating with the dawn's first rays that poured in, casting long, golden beams across the cluttered space. The air was thick with a sense of transformation, the very walls resonating with a silence so profound it felt like a prayer and offering of her surrender and her destiny. Her gaze shifted from the shimmering key in her hand to the cracked mirror across the room, its fractured surface reflecting her new face, calmer, clearer, yet infinitely wiser. The reflection was no longer a fractured mirror of despair but a mosaic of resilience, each shard reflecting the myriad battles fought and won. "It's time," she whispered softly, voice steady with conviction, the realization that all her struggles, all her pain, had led to this moment of unbreakable truth. Her voice resonated through the quiet, a vow to herself and to the universe. "I am the key. I am the mirror. I choose my own reflection now." With deliberate grace, she approached the ancient chest that had once been a prison of secrets. The rusted latch clicked open under her hand, revealing well-worn photographs, faded letters, and the final piece, a small, ornate box containing a single, metallic key. Her fingers trembled, but her heart was resolute, knowing that this key would unlock more than just a door. It would unlock her true self. The light from the attic window cast a halo around her as she inserted the key into the lock, each rotation a step further into her liberation. The door swung open with a gentle groan, revealing a treasure trove of memories, truths, and unspoken regrets laid bare and awaiting her command. The camera lingered on her face, serene yet fierce, her eyes shining with unshakable purpose. A soft, almost sacred glow enveloped her, illuminating the space in a radiant embrace, a testament to her inner victory over darkness, a celebration of her soul's awakening. She reached inside the chest, drawing out a letter, her own, penned in her hand but written in another lifetime's desperation. She read it silently, the words echoing within her: "You are worthy. You are whole. You are free." A gentle breeze stirred the dust, lifting it into the dawnlit air as the attic seemed to breathe with renewed life. Claire's silhouette stood tall and unbowed, bathed in the divine golden hue, poised on the brink of a new beginning, hers for the taking. The scene held her figure, a beacon of resilience amid the radiant glow, before slowly fading into a dawn that promised endless possibilities and the quiet reassurance that she had finally reclaimed her reflection, her story, and her true self. The morning sun cast a soft, golden glow through the window, spilling warmth across a room now imbued with a quiet serenity. Claire sat gently at her vanity, a deep breath steadying her swirling thoughts. The mirror before her was polished but unframed, an unspoken symbol of the reflection she had finally reclaimed. Her green eyes, once filled with shadows of doubt and despair, now shimmered with a clarity born of acceptance. In her lap, her hands rested peacefully, fingers slightly intertwined, as if holding on to the fragments of her story finally come together. The events of her journey, the pain, the betrayal, the moments of dark awakening whispered softly in her mind, each a delicate thread woven into the fabric of her new self. She reached out, her fingertips brushing the cool glass, her reflection staring back calm, honest, and unguarded. The tumult of chaos had subsided, replaced by a gentle tide of peace that washed over her like the dawn after a long, restless night. Her gaze lingered a moment longer, absorbing the story etched into her features, a testament to resilience and transformation. A quiet smile bloomed, tender and genuine, as she allowed herself to feel the fullness of her awakening. The mirror became a portal of truth, a mirror not just of her outward form but of her inner renewal. She closed her eyes briefly, pressing her palms to her chest, feeling the steady rise and fall of her breath, each inhalation a silent vow to cherish her newfound clarity. The subtle warmth of the room deepened, the soft sunlight blending with shadows, creating a tapestry of gentle contrasts emphasizing the delicate balance between darkness past and light ahead. The scene was tender, a cinematic embrace of acceptance, the moment when all the chaos distilled into calm, and her tangled past wove itself into a tapestry of wisdom. She slowly rose from her seat, each movement deliberate yet unhurried, a quiet affirmation of her mastery over her own narrative. Her steps were light, yet purposeful, echoing the shift from turmoil toward serenity. She paused by the window, the horizon stretching peacefully beyond, a boundless space of possibility. A single bird crossed the sky, its wings beating steady against the emerging dawn, a symbol of hope and renewal. Claire watched it silently, her reflection merging with the luminous sky, embodying the silent promise that her inner peace was now rooted in authenticity. As she turned away from the window, the camera lingered on her face, a portrait of gentle strength, of a woman who had traversed her shadows and emerged whole. The scene faded into a tranquil silence, a lingering shot of a journey's end and a fresh beginning, an invitation to embrace the peace she had fought so hard to find. The morning sun poured gently through the large windows, casting a warm, amber glow across the quiet room. Claire sat cross-legged on the floor, The last of her journey lay before her in an aged journal she'd painstakingly gathered, each page a fragment of her past, each inked word a step toward understanding. Her reflection danced faintly on the glass, soft and calm, amidst the flickering light of dawn, embodying the awakening of her true self. With quiet reverence, she traced the outline of the mirror, fingertips brushing against the surface that had once shown only fractured images of her lost identity. Now, it reflected not mere shadows but a woman transformed whole, unafraid, and rooted in gentle acceptance. The shift had been subtle, like the first light of dawn creeping over the horizon, slowly dissolving the darkness of denial. She lifted her gaze, meeting her own eyes, those striking green windows to her soul filled with a quiet wisdom that bloomed in the fragile space of her newfound peace. The chaotic storm of her internal battles had passed, replaced by a soothing tide of clarity, forgiveness, and purpose. Her breath was slow, deliberate, each inhale an affirmation of the life she had reclaimed. The room remained still, the only sound a faint whisper of the wind through the open window, inviting her into the limitless horizon of possibility. This was her moment of surrender to truth, not as an act of surrender but as an act of sovereignty. The landscape outside stretched endlessly, a sacred canvas awaiting her next chapter, unburdened and genuine. She gently sat back on her heels, folding her hands on her lap, eyes closing for a moment of silent gratitude. Her mind drifted to echoes of earlier memories, now softened into gentle recollections. Everything pain, betrayal, hope had sculpted her into this resilient figure, the mirror reflecting her true self. A single tear traced down her cheek, a testament to the journey, a quiet release of all that once constrained her. She whispered softly, almost inaudibly, "I am whole. I am free." The scene lingered on her tranquil face, bathed in the dawn's first light, a portrait of serenity and strength, the culmination of her internal voyage. As the camera pulled back, the room faded into a luminous glow, embodying the purest expression of her healing and the timeless dawn of renewal. The universe seemed to pause in reverence, the shadows finally retreating, leaving only the gentle promise of hope and the eternal possibility of becoming wholly oneself. The horizon blushed with the first golden light of dawn, spilling across the tranquil sea that whispered secrets to the awakening world. Claire stood silently at the edge of the sprawling coastline, the salty breeze caressing her skin, tousling her auburn hair as if nature itself had woven her into its eternal tapestry. Her eyes, once shadowed with doubt and fear, shone now with a gentle, unwavering clarity and acceptance forged through pain and liberation. In her hands rested a single, worn letter, the last piece of her journey, from a life she once only glimpsed, now wholly embraced. Its faded ink shimmered softly in the early light, a testament to resilience. She unfolded it gently, reading words that shimmered with silent beauty, words of love, forgiveness, and reconciliation from a past long denied. The silent universe seemed to hold its breath, the only sound the rhythmic lullaby of waves, washing away the jagged edges of her fractured self. Her breath slowed, deepening as the warmth of the sun seeped into her bones, warming the hollow chambers of her heart. The horizon stretched infinitely, a canvas of promise and renewal mirroring her own rebirth. She closed her eyes, breathing in the salt-kissed air, feeling the flow of new possibilities, no longer haunted by shadows or fractured mirrors, but aligned with the truth of her core. The mirror in her mind reflected a woman who had tumbled through darkness and emerged luminous, a soul unshackled and whole. A faint smile lifted her lips, tender and quiet, as if whispering a sacred prayer to the vast, forgiving sky. Her silhouette, serene against the vastness, embodied the silent courage of transformation, a testament to the human spirit's capacity to forgive, to heal, to become anew. The scene lingered, capturing her standing at the dawn of a new chapter, a symbol of unspoken victory and tender peace. The gentle wind carried her unvoiced vow to cherish her truths and honor her journey before fading into the vast embrace of the sea and sky, leaving only the lingering echo of hope and the quiet promise of everlasting renewal. What would you do if a letter revealed an unknown life? Share your thoughts.